Welcome to the Silent Hill Ascension post show. I am Noah, back here with the wonderful Martin Montgomery. Thank you for joining us, Martin.
Thank you for having me, Noah. It's awesome to be here.
So glad to have you. So let's just dive right in to the interview. Um, so before we go in too deep, let's quickly talk about Carl and Meta, which y'all saw the scene now. She's Dr. Kevorkian. What? How'd you come up with that, Martin?
Well, so it was a group effort. Let me put it that way. In general, when you're putting together an interactive narrative, you're really looking for a lot of complexity in the character relationships because there's an adage that story is conflict. So the more kind of complicated relationships you can have, the more role playing you can get into that. So, we thought, well, it's kind of messed up if Carl's in a relationship with his deceased wife, and Astrid has some opinions about that, and then we thought, what if we gave her kind of a messed up past? So that's kind of where it was born out of.
And really, that's the source of the scandalo, because you decided to have this great big scandal of the sister of the dead wife, and also they have that signature Johansson woman haircut, which maybe Astrid will join the club at some point. Let's go back a little bit, Martin. Can you introduce your role here at Silent Hill for our wonderful audience?
Yeah, so I'm the creative director on the project. I'm primarily involved mainly in kind of the narrative and narrative design. I work on kind of overseeing cinematics. But yeah, I kind of have a hand in a lot of things on the project, which is fun.
Yeah, and you are really the evil mastermind behind a lot of this.
I think Jacob has claimed that title, but I'm here just to do his bidding in all of this craziness. So
you're just following orders. But our audience is wondering, speaking of spook, what's the deal with Eva?
Oh, Eva.
Oh, come on.
Some fun stuff with Ava coming up very, very soon. I can confirm some people are very, very close to the truth, but I won't bring that up now. You'll just have to stay tuned and see. So it's
What the fuck?
very exciting.
I, for one, for real though, I really want to know. She's actually legit scaring me and stressing me out.
Ava's one of my her own drum, so I'm a big fan of her for sure.
She really does. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we've been doing behind the scenes during the holiday break?
Yeah. So apart from giving the dev team a chance to spend time with family and get a bit of a break, development on some things that are upcoming, and then also just shoring up a lot of our production processes. I don't think people generally realize how much goes into putting on not only making the content, but putting on the show on a daily basis. We didn't have this process really before this project existed. So there's a lot of work to be done to improve those, which means, better processes mean better story, better cinematics. So that's a lot of what we've been doing behind the scenes on that.
Right, that and eating a bunch of stuff. I'd also want to focus with you a little more on the process behind making the story for Silent Hill Ascension,
Sure.
If you won't mind.
I would love to do that. I'll talk about it all day.
Great. So let's dive into a key decision that played out yesterday. So obviously, Rachel lost an eye.
She did. I was rooting for that to happen. So well done, chat. I was very, very excited to get that one out.
We are very excited. We did want to see the gore, and I love, like Eduardo said, Eric's eye was never on the table here. But for the audience choice. You
Oh, yeah.
you wanted to see that kind of drama gore happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime that we are trying to design choices, we are trying to spur debate and for people to feel strongly about something that they want to have happen in the story. So I think the fact that redemption, which has typically been the thing that has kind of led so far, is in contention with this really gnarly choice to take Rachel's eye. I'm all for that, especially because I know the audience has some very strong opinions about who Rachel is as a person. And so it's cool to have choices where they get to express how they actually feel about that in more tangible ways, which is cool.
Right. And so how does the narrative get set up to lead to a moment like this?
Sure. Yeah, it's, this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but story, the writing team and the narrative designers work really hand in hand to sort of set up the structure for a season like this, right? And sometimes the writing informs the narrative design. So, a writer might come and say, I have this really cool story beat. I think we can make a choice out of it. And the narrative designer says, yeah. Or the other way around, a designer might come and say, oh my gosh, I have the coolest idea for a choice that we could do. And then the writer will accommodate that, right? So they're really looking at the story that's trying to be told. And they're looking at, okay, when do we want to kind of let the audience just kind of go for a ride? And then when do we want to give them opportunities to actually influence the narrative in really interesting ways? Yeah.
Right. And the audience have three choices a lot of times. How do we make the three options compelling?
Yeah. So I worked at Telltale a long time ago, back when we were first kind of doing things like Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us. And one of the things that we learned from when we started doing data on that is we could see the spread for how players wanted to role play, right? So sometimes you would get a choice that would be like 80% of the people picked it and maybe only 20% picked the other one, and things like that. And so usually that's an indicator for us that there was kind of an obvious right answer. You know what I mean? And so for designers, you're really trying to set things up so that it's as even across the board as possible. So you're really trying to think about the pros and cons with each and making each one viable. And I think the best choices have ones where you're thinking, wow, I could make my character get this or act in this way, which would be awesome. But then there's a cost to it. And that way you really have sort of competing, you have competition between those choices, I think.
Right, and all the writers leave one of their feathers equally in each of the choices to make them as impactful. So in your past interview, we showed on screen a narrative tree, my beautiful nightmare narrative tree, belonging to the very dramatic scene where Toby died.
Yes.
Production, can you please show us the wonderful narrative? Dios mío, sorry, this is bringing back my fan. So could you remind us how that played out?
Yeah, first of all, justice for Toby. Big fan of that guy. Yeah, so you've heard throughout this entire season that we kind of have two major ways that the audience is able to kind of influence whether characters survive. So the first one's through the fate system. So when you make a decision and you pick a particular choice, that goes towards that character's fate. And then when you engage in puzzles and endure, we have the hope system, right? So when there are points in the story where a character can offboard, we check both of those scores. So in Toby's case, we took him down a path where he unfortunately was not going to be able to be redeemed. But over on the left there's a few endings that you can see where he would have made it out, and he could have lived happily ever after, drinking until he's old and gray. But
he could have had a life, everybody. He could have had a life. You did this. Well, maybe I had a part in it too. But can you show us how these choices are designed in production? Can you please show us on screen so that Martin can visually take us through it?
Yeah, so what I want to do now is I want to run you through how our tools work, and then I want to take a scene from Silent Hill 2 I'm a big fan of Eddie eating pizza. So I'm going to try to take that scene and show you how I might turn that into an interactive narrative. So in general, when you start thinking about an interactive scene, the first thing that you're doing is you're trying to think about a goal that character wants. So if you remember in that story, James is looking for the little girl Laura. And so let's say that the scene is about James coming in and trying to get information from Eddie. So first thing we would do is kind of set up our nodes, kind of the structure of the scene. So we'll start off with some story in here, and then we will add a choice that the audience can make on that right there. We'll come up with our 3 options.
You're so fast, Martin. This is
we'll see.
like, man, there's a lot of work that goes on here. Y'all don't even know what we go through. But Martin is really exhibiting some major skills here.
So what I'm doing here is first we'll have a choice here, and then it will what we call trunk. So that's when your branches come back into a main area, and then we'll have a callback that will result in different endings for the scene. So what we would do is typically this is what we call crit path. So this means that no matter where you are, you always see this. So I'm going to start writing this like I would if this was a screenplay. So in this case, it takes place at Pete's Bowl-O-Rama, which is an awesome name. And the scene starts with James James walks in to find Eddie chowing down on pizza. And so, James, this is actually from the game script. James says, Eddie? And Eddie says, you're, and then James says, James, we met in the apartment building. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, but basically James asks, hey, are you alone here, Eddie? And then we see a bowling ball rolls into frame. Laura runs out of the building.
That's never good.
Sorry?
That's never good when you run after a ball like that when you're a kid. That's not good.
So James, this is where James is going to ask, hey, Eddie, I need information about who that was. Like, Eddie, I need to talk to that girl. Do you know where she's going? And at this point, right, we want to have a little bit of conflict. So Eddie's going to say, I'm not going to give that information without you telling me something. So maybe he's chowing down, so his mouth is full, and he says, I don't know where she went. So, okay, Eddie keeps talking. So now at this point, we're going to have a choice that happens here. So let's pop this open. Let's just call this choice.
And by the way, another fun fact, when I started, I used to read crit path wrong, and I read it crypt path.
Crypt. Listen, you'll see me doing all sorts of spelling errors as I'm doing this. So, all right. So we want to have 3 choices here. And I think like the first one, Eddie has some very strong opinions about how people perceive him. And I think James doesn't really help that. So let's say that maybe the first option is the shame him choice. And I think this is where in this you would really get that line from James, which is, my favorite one. The town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza? Right?
It's a classic.
That's a classic. And then maybe the second one is, well, maybe we just take his pizza away from him. So take away his pizza. And in this one, James grabs the pizza from Eddie and says something like, I don't know, hey, I need you to pay attention to me. And maybe Eddie's not very happy about that. Hey, what are you doing? And then maybe the third one is, Eddie is big into food, so maybe we can offer him a drink. We picked up a bunch of like health drinks while we've been walking around Silent Hill. He's been eating, maybe he's thirsty. So how about we offer him a drink? A drink or something.
I'm quenched with all the tea that I'm seeing in the chat here. I see somebody saying Eddie would disagree.
How about a drink to go with that pizza? And Eddie's like, hey, thanks. I was thirsty. Okay, so at this point, we have our 3 different branches, and then what we're going to do is we're going to continue the story here. So we'll have another crit path thing here, and maybe this is the point at which Eddie says his sort of his other kind of lines from that scene where he says, she said she's fine by herself. She said a fatso like me would just slow her down. Poor Eddie. So
poor Eddie.
Here's an interesting thing that happens all the time in narrative. I have to make sure that all 3 of these flow into this same line right here. So in this shame thing here, he says, this town is full of monsters. How can you just sit there and eat? So, in the actual scene, Eddie just kind of ignores James in this.
We have another one in the chat saying the redemption is Eddie. Let's have a slice and hold hands.
Oh, I mean, come on. That sounds amazing. We should totally for that.
Wholesome. Yes.
Cool. So, all right. So we picked 3 of these and we allow you to kind of role play on that. And so now we're going to have what is called a callback. And so callback is the audience, you've made a choice. So let's call back to the choice that you just made. So we will repeat these. I'm just going to copy paste these for time. Boom. We'll shame him. We'll take away the pizza like that. And we'll offer him a drink. So in the shame him, right? Like Eddie just kind of ignores him. Eddie continues chowing down. And James just says, I think in the original scene, he just says, forget you, and leaves. So look, the audience, your goal was to get information out of Eddie, and by shaming him, you didn't find out where Laura was. So that's the ending for that one. Let's say that you take away the pizza. So in this one, maybe Eddie's like still kind of pissed that you took his food. So maybe he says something like, you think I tell you? Maybe he's still hungry. I'm out of here. I'm still hungry. He leaves. Okay, cool. So he still left, and the audience still did not get the information that they wanted. But maybe you offered him a drink. So we're going to go in this, and maybe Eddie like wipes his mouth and burps, because that seems like something he would do. Thanks. Again, I was really thirsty. I think the girl said she was going to the school. Boom. Okay. So what we've done, right, is we had some story at the top. We created a choice that have 3 different ways you can role play. Those kind of flow into the same line that you have right here. And then we had a callback that actually had 3 different endings. And so this is just kind of a general shape, a really quick way that we might take a scene from Silent Hill 2 and very quickly try to turn it into a very rough take on an interactive narrative. So, yeah.
So this was a day in the life of Martin Montgomery. No, but this rules, and I say that the chat seemed to like really get involved in it. Like the potential is endless, and the branches are endless. So thank you, Martin, for showing us. And
I'll say this: if you were ever interested in doing your own interactive narrative, Twine is a really great tool that is free to use. So you can go and create an account, and you can do things that are very similar to this. And it's free. So go check it out.
Pro tip from Martin. So thank you so much, Martin. let's also revisit, speaking of all the branches and all that business with the decisions, can we see the decision that opened today? If production could pull that up, I would love to read it for y'all with my beautiful soprano voice. But meanwhile, I'll just tell you what it is. How will Astrid deal with Neil's interview request? So she's kind of cornered here, right? Like her son is missing, and there's a true crime podcast happening in real time that she can participate in. So will she be honest and open, which is the redemption option? Or will she attack Neil's credibility, which is the suffering option? Or threaten them to back off, which is the domination? So make sure you vote on that. Again, fate decision. Martin.
Yeah.
This is, how dare you put Niels, the podcaster, doing a true crime doc while the crime is happening?
Well, not only that, Nils seems to have some history with some of our characters, so that's kind of interesting too. So,
yeah, everybody seems to have some kind of personal stake here in this Johansson world, you know.
Nils seems to be he's making a podcast about it. That's pretty gnarly.
It's pretty gnarly, and honestly, do you think? Are we gonna see a redemption comeback here, or you think we're gonna keep going with our devilish domination paths?
I mean, I am all for the damnation path at this point. So, for those in the chat that are pushing for that, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, and chaos ensues.
Chaos is the ladder.
But we are nearing the end of the show here, so let's recap again. We do have the decision that open. Make sure you take part in that. And Martin, thanks again so much for showing us through a bit of the behind the scenes of everything. This was so wonderful to have you. So I hope you guys stick around for the play the puzzles. Make your choice on the decision. It is a fate decision. Let's recap what happened here. We have creepy Mette in Norway. I can't tell who's creepier anymore. We have creepy ladies in Norway. We have Rachel missing an eye, missing a daughter, and about to lose her husband. I want to thank Martin again because you are so wonderful. And the chat also, I see, really appreciated you showing us through it. So thank you again.
It was awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to, show how the sausage is made. It's really fun.
Amazing. So production, can you please pull up the plan that for the next shows that are coming? We have our next pre-show at 5:40 p.m. Pacific on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, per usual. We have the show on 6 p.m. Pacific on weekdays, per usual, and post shows right after on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, where I might be here, the wonderful Leila, Eduardo, maybe even Martin again. Who knows? So stick around, find out, and thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.